Top of the morning to you. Friday. I don't know about you guys, but, and I know I've said this before, and I've heard other people say, like, God, these days are just getting faster and faster. I can't believe it's the end of the week already, and that kind of thing. You know, whether you have a 3-day weekend or not, it doesn't matter. I found myself like, man, I could have swore it was just Monday, and now it's Friday. It's just amazing how time flies these days. But Zero Hedge has an interesting article. You know, the world's arch nemesis, George Soros. Soros says the European Union is now in an existential crisis, and Trump's America is a hostile power. There's not a chance in hell somebody like him would be saying these kind of things, along with these other ones. Other people, elitists out there vocally showing how much they hate this man, Trump. There's not a chance in hell they're going to do that if Trump is really, truly part of that club. You got to understand that. They've never, ever, ever done that before, have they? You can't show me anybody, president-wise, who they've done this to, except for Donald Trump. So, Soros, the European Union is now in an existential crisis, and Trump's America is a hostile power. Now, it's funny because didn't Angela Merkel of Germany just come out and say, oh, well, it looks like Europe's on her own now? Essentially referring to the United States, like we can't rely on them as a power anymore. And also one of these European nations, we're not going to be able to share intelligence with America anymore. Whatever. Piss off. Commenting on the current state of the European experiment, George Soros warned the European Union has plunged into an existential crisis as a result of dysfunctional institutions and austerity mandates, and will require the bloc to reinvent itself to survive. Speaking at the Brussels Economic Forum, the billionaire investor said the EU had, quote, lost its momentum, as he urged policymakers to abandon hopes of an ever closer union driven by a top-down approach from Brussels, a statement which will likely displease Germany. Quote, the European Union is now in an existential crisis, Soros told a Brussels audience. Most Europeans of my generation were supporters of further integration. I bet they were. Those are called the globalists, the neocon globalists. Your generation of elites, anyways. Subsequent generations came to regard the EU as an enemy that deprives them of a secure and promising future, he said. Just a day after Brussels published a paper mapping out its vision of Eurozone integration, Mr. Soros warned that the single currency era had become, quote, the exact opposite of what was originally intended, according to the Telegraph. Quoted by CNBC, hard to believe, Soros said Europe's reinvention would have to revive the support that the European Union used to enjoy. The reinvention would have to review past mistakes and explain what went wrong, and make proposals to make things right. Soros welcomed a German idea to cut European funds aimed at reducing income inequalities at the regional level for those countries disrespecting the rule of law. Oh, that would be all of your club members, including the European Central Bank, European Union itself, because they promised they would not do the bailouts and things. That was part of, remember they couldn't do that, couldn't bail out banks and stuff, but they did it anyways. Well, that's their law. There's no regard for that law. Is that the one you're talking about? Oh, of course not. Both Hungary and Poland, which are net recipients of the so-called cohesion funds, have been criticized by European institutions for their weak standards with regards to the rule of law. Well, that's funny. Hungary is one I mentioned a few times. They kicked out all genetically modified crops. You cannot grow that stuff there anymore. They got rid of all of it. Hungary is not down with the whole refugee crisis, coming into their country. So it's funny how those two countries are named. The billionaire also reminded his host that the European Union was meant to be a voluntary association of like-minded states that were willing to surrender part of their sovereignty for the common good. Again, whose common good? The elite's common good. After the financial crisis of '08, the Eurozone was transformed into a creditor/debtor relationship where the debtor countries couldn't meet their obligations and the creditor countries dictated the terms that the debtors had to meet, he said. By imposing an austerity policy, they made it practically impossible for the debtor countries to grow out of their debts. The net result was neither voluntary nor equal. Again, but a lot of these so-called debtor nations got into debt on their own, and they got to where everything was falling apart. Now, granted, many of the citizens of those, like Greece, for example, did not say, IMF, come bail us out. And even though you promised us 3 different bailouts, you're only giving us payments. And every time you say, well, that's not good enough, austerity, we need more of that, you need to cut those, privatize that company, and privatize that company, we'll give you the next payment. The next payment? No, I thought you were giving us the full loan. No. We're giving you a full loan on paper, but we're just going to make payments to you on it. So that when we're done privatizing everything off to our club members, we know you're going to default anyways, but it won't matter because it wasn't really their money anyways. And now they're going to own everything in Greece. And you poor peasants of Greece are now going to make all your payments, toll roads, water bills, everything. You're going to start paying these people. And when they jack up the rates, they're not going to have any kind of pity for you. These are globalist companies. This is the kind of, climate treaty, Paris Accord that Trump just said F you on, by the way, because it would lose a bunch of millions of jobs in the U.S. by being a part of it, right? Again, would an elitist do that? Trump did that. So again, looks like he's really certainly trying anyways. I don't know about the people surrounding him, but he certainly looks like he's trying. He correctly said loss of trust in the EU has paved the way for support for anti-European political parties and said the goal of an ever closer union had to be abandoned. Now we need a collaborative effort that combines, once again, the top-down, pyramid, the top-down approach of the EU institutions with the bottom-up movements that are necessary to engage the electorate, said Soros, and added that instead of a multi-speed Europe, we should aim for a multi-track Europe that would allow member states a wider variety of choices. This would have a far-reaching beneficial effect. Or again, you're going to have poor nations benefiting from the rich nations, and those richer nations who have a nice standard of living, like America for the most part, right, even though that's going downhill, will be taken away so that it'll equalize with the poorer nations. Even if the poorer nations got themselves poor due to the bad politicians that they've, allegedly voted in and took their countries down and cooked the books and did a fraudulent thing over here and did that. So now the other countries have to pay for that. Again, I don't think so. That's why when Trump says America first, he means America first. He's not going to make those decisions that these other countries have done where it wasn't America first or Germany first or this one first or Greece first or Cyprus first. So again, I got to applaud him for those things. I'm still bothered by some of his picks of Goldman Sachs, but whatever. It is what it is at this point. He urged the bloc to focus on 3 key areas dealing with the refugee crisis. Yeah, that's simple. Turn them back around and reverse it completely, and whoever's in there getting back out of the country. But that's not what they want. Stand by, my phone's ringing. Well, I'm not even sure where I left off, but I think I know. So I'm going to continue where I think I should be. He urged the bloc to focus on 3 key areas dealing with the refugee crisis, Brexit, and the lack of an economic growth strategy. Now, hold on. Wait a second. Brexit was a non-issue. Oh, it can leave. It won't hurt us at all. We'll be fine. So all of a sudden you need to focus on 3 key areas, and that's one of the key areas you got to focus on, Brexit. Britain leaving. Fight xenophobia and hostile powers. Predictably, the man who some have alleged was behind the great migration movement that sent 1 million, mostly Syrian refugees in Germany in the past 2 years, Soros said Europe needs to overcome the current existential crisis by fighting together against the rise of anti-European sentiment, xenophobic feelings, and surrounding hostile powers. Externally, the EU is now surrounded by hostile powers. Putin's Russia, Erdogan's Turkey, Sisi's Egypt, and the America that Trump would like to create but can't, he said. He called for an update of European treaties to make the EU work better and allow a multi-track bloc where countries would have a wider variety of choices when it comes to integration. Brexit. Discussing Brexit, Soros, who rose to prominence as the man who broke the Bank of England for his bets against the pound in the early 1990s, warned Brussels against punishing Britain in forthcoming Brexit negotiations and said Brussels should not get distracted with the upcoming EU exit negotiations with the United Kingdom and continue their work to regain the trust of EU citizens. Guess what? Those days are over. You don't have the trust of EU citizens because they saw what you did to them with the refugee crisis you're bringing in. But they're mostly women and children. No, they're mostly young men from Northern Africa and the Middle East. That's what they are. But when you see a photo op, oh, there's a woman and a child. But then when you're there and you got people in the streets with the video cameras going and you're all over the place, it's nothing but essentially what we call fighting age men. Isn't that amazing? Brexit will be an immensely damaging process. What? Harmful to both sides. Well, how? It was a non-issue, you guys said. It was a non-issue. Most of the damage is felt right now when the European Union is in an existential crisis, but its attention is diverted to negotiating the separation from Britain, he said. So nothing he said had anything to do with the fact that the European Central Bank is still printing, QE, quantitative easing, printing money out of control to deal with the enormous amount of bad debts all over the place in the EU. That's not even one of the key things he mentioned. Isn't that amazing? Like, that's just not even an issue. He also said Brexit is likely to take as long as 5 years and that the EU should approach negotiations in a constructive spirit and should use Brexit to transform itself into an organization that other countries like Britain would want to join, instead of seeking to punish Britain. The European Union must resist temptation to punish Britain and approach the negotiations in a constructive spirit. It should use Brexit as a catalyst for introducing far-reaching reforms, he said. The divorce will be a long process, taking as long as 5 years. During that time, the EU could transform itself into an organization that other countries like Britain would want to join. If that happens, two sides will want to be reunited even before the divorce is completed, he said. Nah, Mr. Darth Vader, God, that guy looks, I'm looking at his picture. God, he looks terrible. I don't think so. Again, you guys have screwed over the European people with the refugee crisis alone. If nothing else, the refugee crisis alone is killing the people. And you're not listening to them, and they're realizing we have unelected officials telling all of our countries, here's your quota, open your doors. Would you like someone to come in your neighborhood, the mayor of an unelected area comes into your town, he's not really your mayor, and you didn't vote for him. As a matter of fact, nobody did except for these elites. And he's telling you you're going to have to open your door to riffraff. Riffraff's moving in your neighborhood, and you got to take him in. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, are you taking any of your neighbors' riffraff? Are you taking in riffraff? Well, of course not. We don't take in riffraff. You guys do. No thanks, right? So whatever that is, I don't want to be a part of it. Thanks, but no thanks. On to the next one. Take care.